Ukrainian President Zelensky calling on Western allies to throw more support to Ukraine. In an address to world leaders at the United Nations, Zelensky said Ukrainians want peace and an end to the war. Now, the president is expecting...
Peace is needed, and it must be a real, just peace.
Oh, that was Zelensky speaking this week. He's expected to deliver his full victory plan to U.S. President Joe Biden later today. For more on what that might entail, we are joined by retired Major General Dennis Thompson. Good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
So President Zelensky saying his peace plan will bring an end to the war. How feasible are his plans?
Well, I think it's important to dissect exactly what we're talking about here. He has a victory plan, which is not exactly a peace plan. It is linked to the Global Peace Summit that was held in Switzerland earlier this year, and it's part of his broader formula for peace, which he announced 2 years ago at the G20 in November 2022. And it had 10 elements, including the reestablishment of Ukraine's territorial integrity, including nuclear safety, and of course, including security guarantees for Ukraine in the future, which is code for joining NATO. They all feature as part of his victory plan, which he's going to unveil to Mr. Biden if he hasn't done so already, but certainly the U.S. administration is going to be exposed to it. It contains those elements, and as you probably are aware, during his speech to the United Nations General Assembly, he emphasized nuclear safety, because at the moment, there are only 3 nuclear power plants operating inside of Ukraine. There are no thermal power plants operating inside of Ukraine. They've all been knocked out by the Russians. And there's been serious degradation to the hydroelectric capacity inside of Ukraine. So what he is proposing actually requires that Ukraine get to the victory point. In other words, that they reestablish their territorial integrity and kick the Russians out. And they do that by the end of the year. It's clearly not very realistic, to be frank.
Yeah, so he's been asked to present this victory plan. He is going to do that when he has that meeting with both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. But then what is the next step? Does it have to be approved? He's presenting the plan, but then what's the action after that?
Well, here's the thing. Part of the plan is to get release authority for those long-range missiles that they've been looking for some time now. And that includes the French Scalp missile, the British Storm Shadow, and of course the American Army tactical missile system, all of which have a range of around 300 kilometers. It's not a panacea. It won't solve all their problems. They've actually been able to strike deeper into Russia using their own drones. Just as not so long ago, the 18th of September, they hit a large ammunition dump in Toropets, which is 300 kilometers northwest of Moscow, and caused extensive damage. Some believe as much as 3 months' supply of ammunition went up in that one strike. But the point here is that they cannot get to the final victory line just by striking targets 300 kilometers inside of Russia, particularly since most of Russia's air force is now outside of the range of those potential Western supplied missiles.
I wanted to ask you, too, about the meeting there's some controversy over whether or not this victory plan will also be presented to presidential candidate Donald Trump. What would be the benefit of him having meetings with both the sitting president and the Republican nominee?
Well, I think perhaps he could give Mr. Trump a little bit of a reality check, but beyond that, I'm not sure he can communicate effectively with Mr. Trump. I'm not sure anybody can.
I wanted to ask you as well, the other story we're following this morning, of course, this is the escalating conflict in the Middle East. Now that we have seen this escalation, how does Zelensky keep the attention of global leaders on the war in Ukraine and on his mission?
He needs to keep doing what he's doing now. He needs to get up in front of international forums, whether that's the United Nations General Assembly, which happens to be meeting this week. He addressed the United Nations Security Council. He's speaking directly to the U.S., the sitting U.S. administration, and he needs to continue to tour European capitals to keep this front and center. There's a war in Europe, and it cannot be ignored. It's a war of attrition at the moment, and it's one that will require an awful lot more resources from the West if there's any hope of Ukraine actually getting to execute the victory plan that Mr. Zelensky is going to present in Washington today.
How much additional support does the West, including Canada, need to provide Ukraine?
It's difficult to say. The war has definitely transitioned from, well, let's just state that any professional soldiers that were on either side, Russia or Ukraine, have largely been either killed, wounded, or they're out of play right now. And so you have two citizen armies going at it inside of Ukraine and outside of Ukraine in the Kursk region. The bottom line here is that when it's two citizen armies, we are in a war of attrition, and that takes an awful lot of resources. I couldn't give you what the order of magnitude is, but at the moment, Russia outnumbers Ukraine in terms of weight of artillery fire 5-1, and in terms of just basic population, Russia outnumbers Ukraine 4-1. So these are not exactly encouraging statistics. It will come down to the morale of the armies on the ground, and as Napoleon once said, the moral is to the physical as 3-1. So morale is important. We don't know how brittle the Russian army is and whether it'll break. And likewise, we have a belief that the Ukrainians will stay in the fight right to the end, one that I certainly share.
Retired Major General Dennis Thompson, always great to have your perspective. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.